Scaffolding. It's used on construction sites across the country every day, in most cases without incident. But when it does fail, it's often catastrophic.
Luckily, most of these workers were at morning tea, so as a result we have 3 patients. 2 of them have ridden this down 4 floors. One guy jumped off at the 3rd floor.
The 2 men had only recently started work for the day on a new residential tower at Broadbeach, 26 stories above the ground.
The uncomfortable truth behind these events is that collapses are entirely preventable. If established safe practices, inspection and maintenance procedures are followed, serious incidents will be averted and lives will be saved. Design plans, safe completion sign-offs, regular scheduled inspections, training and induction of users, ongoing maintenance, and proper procedures for modification. These are the important ingredients to ensure safe scaffolding.
The reason we build Scaffold is to provide access for workers and materials to an elevated workplace. And what we're looking for is that the materials are adequately supported and that the workers feel safe.
Got to ensure that the scaffolding is based on firm foundations, the scaffolding is built in accordance with the design, and the scaffold is erected by suitably qualified people. That is basically holders of a licence if the scaffold full distance is 4 metres or greater.
Once the scaffold has been erected on site and handed over to the principal contractor, it then becomes his responsibility. He's taken over the responsibility of that scaffold for all of his trades that he's going to have using on that scaffold. If he's got general trades, they have to be inducted on site initially for safety reasons on what they can and can't do.
It's also important to be aware of these key points. The scaffold must be appropriate for the task. All scaffold components must be compatible. All working platforms must have safe and clear access and egress. All working platforms must have top guardrails, mid-rails and toe boards. And the scaffold must be complete. Modular scaffolding used to construct both perimeter and birdcage scaffolding represents the largest proportion of scaffolding used in Australia. It's distributed under many brand names, but they all share the same basic structural components. These are standards, ledges and transoms. The standards or uprights are the vertical tubes that transfer the entire mass of the structure to the ground, where they rest on a square base plate. The base plate, which is generally adjustable, has a shank in its centre to hold the tube and is often bearing on a sole board. Ledges are horizontal tubes which connect the standards. Transoms are usually made from welded angle and are attached to the standards at right angles. They provide support for boards, which form the working platform. These basic components are used in many configurations. One of the more common forms is the perimeter scaffold.
Perhaps the most important member of any scaffold is the standards or vertical members. We have to keep them plumb. How we achieve this is through 2 techniques. The first one is to install a suitable bracing system throughout the scaffold. It should extend from the base of the scaffold, continuously up through the scaffold to the top working platform. And the second means is by ensuring that we have adequate ties. So what we're looking for is a positive tie into the building as an absolute minimum every second lift in the scaffold, or 4 metres vertically, and every 4th standard laterally along the scaffold. When the scaffold's completed, the scaffold crew should provide the end user with a handover certificate, and in many cases they also install a tag at the base of the stair tower or the ladder access tower, which has brief details of the safe working loads of the working platforms for the scaffold, and the date it was last inspected, and who the scaffold company were that actually erected and installed the scaffold.
Subject to the design criteria of the scaffolding, all lifts on perimeter scaffolding up to a height of 20 metres must be fully decked. This is to provide fall protection for the scaffolder in the erection process. Access to these non-working decks should be prevented through the use of barriers and signage.
The access to scaffolds is usually provided by means of a stair access tower. This part of the scaffold gets a lot of traffic during the day. It's heavily used. It's a very important part of the scaffold. So when we're inspecting them, what we should be looking for is any obvious signs of displacement. We should be making sure that the platforms are bearing adequately on the transoms themselves, and we should be looking to see that there are no excessive gaps between the platforms and the transoms. If we find this, we should bring it to the attention of the scaffold company and they'll rectify the situation. The client's brief for this particular project required that we provide access directly above an internal roof. This difficulty was overcome by using a system of cantilever beams. The beams themselves protrude out from the centre of the building out to the work area, and they're backpropped to the building to prevent any uplift. All the working platforms on this scaffold have a double handrail, but in this particular instance, the top working platform, which is a considerable height above the ground, has a third handrail, which gives the workers and the people using that platform an extra feeling of comfort and safety.
Birdcage scaffold has got more than one bay. An independent scaffold's got just one bay that sort of goes around outside a building so you can tie it in. A birdcage scaffold is multiple bays all joined together. It can be 20 metres long by 15 metres wide, or it can be smaller. It can be 4.8 by 4.8. You know, they're virtually, some people call it a tower, but it's actually piggybacking onto another scaffold, so that's actually a birdcage scaffold.
As with the perimeter scaffold, a birdcage scaffold must have a complete working deck with kickboards, double handrails and adequate access. It may also include non-working platforms to be used only in the erection or dismantling process.
The base of the scaffolds, any scaffold, is very important. It depends on the ground, whether it's clay or it could have been raining, it could sink the scaffold. You start putting the scaffold on, it might not sink to get a couple of lifts high. So you need to place sole boards on scaffolds that are built on dirt. On the concrete it's usually okay, but there's different heights of the jacks you can wind up. A normal jack you shouldn't wind up above 300mm, but some of these ones are higher here, but we've actually braced those jacks as well. And this is why it's important to get a drawing of the scaffold that specifies how it should go together and what the base should be.
Suspended scaffolds are platforms hung by ropes or cables from an overhead structure. The most common form is the swing stage scaffold, used to access the exterior of high-rise buildings for construction and maintenance. Initially, the supporting structure needs to be assessed. Then, a detailed design plan must be fully prepared. After erection, the handover certificate must be accompanied by a written statement confirming it is complete and safe for use. All work must be carried out by suitably qualified, experienced people.
There's 32 counterweights per needle, and then we chain them all up with padlocks so that nobody can take them off. These needles here are 2.5 apart because that's the size of the swing down below. As you can see, we've got 2 wire cables hanging off the front of the needle. One is there for your emergency brake, the other one is there for your winch motor. You can't hang both off the one shackle because if one gives way, they both give way, so you have to have the emergency separate. As you can see, everything is moused up so that no one can undo any of our shackles or they do not vibrate loose. And if you move up the cable further, you'll see all the same. Everything is moused. And if you go right up the turnbuckle, that's tied off and also moused up here as well. The swing stage consists of side walls, which are a 500 mid-high handrail. Then on top of that, you've got a 1 metre handrail to stop people from falling over off the swing. Then you've got a floor that goes on the bottom of the swing, which is put together with floor rods that go through the floor to stop any uplift on the floor. All our components, the handrails and the sides, are put together on connectors, which we've got pins there that go through with a circlip in it, and the circlip stays in. They get checked on a daily basis for a safety check. We've got 2 wire cables. One is your prime cable, which runs through to your winch. Your second one there is your skylock, which is a safety factor. That's for your brake. We've got a stop and start button there. You've got your up and down button here, which will take you the swing up and down. And as you can see, there's signs on our swings that explain 250 kgs. If you put too much weight inside a swing, what happens inside your winch is a load limiter set in there. They will go off and beep. Once they beep, you come down and get the weight off, or we have to come in and reset them. We do an induction for the guys that's going to be operating our swings. They cannot operate the swing unless they've got their induction.
Suspended scaffolds require a full inspection prior to use every day. Both the cradle and needles need to be carefully examined. This should be the responsibility of one person, trained by the scaffolding supplier using a checklist to be signed on completion.
If they notice any issues during the inspection on the daily check, they will then notify their safety committee or their foreman in charge, which then will be in touch with us. We will come and rectify it. The swing does not move until it's been rectified.
Key items to check are that the counterweights are securely attached to the suspension support rigging and cannot be displaced or removed without the use of a tool. The secondary wire rope is attached at a point that is independent of the main suspension rope. The hoist's secondary braking device is fitted and working. Safe working load limit signage is fixed to the inside of the swing stage cradle. All cradle guardrails, toe boards and working deck are fitted and secure.
In general terms, a scaffold should be designed in accordance for what the end user is going to be using the scaffold for. Consideration should be given to the loadings on the scaffold, the height of the scaffold and the type of work being undertaken on that scaffold. In construction, for instance, if a bricklayer is going to be using a scaffold, it will be a heavy-duty scaffold. The design should be done by a suitably qualified person who's got experience in design of scaffold. Shade cloth is used on a lot of scaffolds these days for a number of reasons. If it's incorporated into the original design, that's terrific, because normally when that's done, additional ties are put in place to counteract the impact loadings from wind and environment. So it's very important that if you decide as an after factor to put shade cloth on your scaffolds, you take into consideration additional ties and the impact loadings that might occur.
Basically, the scaffolds here is a working deck for demolition and construction of the new structure, but ultimately it was there to prop the existing structure from falling whilst the demolition was taking place. The interior scaffold is tied to the exterior scaffold to support the existing walls. So the complete scaffold is heavy duty for the reasons of propping the existing structure. To get the scaffold process underway, we had to talk to council. City Power came out to advise us. Yarra Trams have given us a permit that gives us the guidelines to work within. Council have advised that we had to have a gantry that had a 10 kPa rating, and the scaffold has been designed to sit on top of that. We've had to get independent temporary works engineers to advise. Their engineer has worked in conjunction with the scaffold company's engineer. The exterior scaffold only has ladder access. They're not working decks throughout the whole system, but the top deck is, and unfortunately we haven't had the width to put a stair scaffold in place. Part of ICE's procedures, our general safety checklist, we make sure that the scaffolding company comes back every 30 days and walks the complete scaffold, makes any adjustments if need be, and signs it off on their scaff tag.
Access towers provide a safe means of access and egress from a scaffold or other structure. They must be properly planned and suitable for the intended works.
If it's going to be relocating around the site in multiple locations, this is perfect for that situation. It's one bay, it's a standalone tower, it'll be tied to the building, it'll go up in stages as the building progresses. It can come down also the same way. This is an access tower for general maintenance on small construction sites, small roofs, small area.
Access towers, like perimeter scaffolds, are not a freestanding structure. They must be secured to a sound structure using adequate ties.
To build an access tower from scratch, sole boards down first, adjustable jacks, standards, transoms and ledges are all locked in place. When you've got your first frame square, and you take that up 4 metres high, and then you get a positive tie to the building. As you're going up, you will place a handrail at every interval as you go up. You continue going up with that and tying it in every 4 metres and bracing it up. So it's repetitive after that.
While the responsibility rests with experts to ensure that a scaffold is erected safely and is fit for the intended work, the responsibility to ensure it remains that way is placed in the hands of the site manager, construction company or builder once they accept the handover certificate from the erector. Everyone using the scaffold needs a level of knowledge sufficient to identify where risks threaten their safety or the safety of others, including the public. Generally, modular scaffoldings fail structurally for one of 3 reasons. The supporting surface gives way. This may be caused by poor backfilling, flooding or excavations. Overloading working platforms with materials such as bricks. Insufficient ties or bracing, most often caused by unauthorised removal. The best way to combat these issues is through regular inspections by a qualified person. All scaffolds should have a full inspection by the supplier every 30 days or less. Scaff tags need to be updated and a report listing any faults given to the site supervisor. They should also be inspected following an event that could affect the stability or integrity of the structure, such as collision with mobile plant or a severe weather event. Further to this, they should be inspected weekly or even daily as part of the routine site safety walk. Things to look out for include: are the standards plumb through their full height? Are ledges and transoms level? Are there any signs of movement at ground level due to subsidence or undermining affecting base plates or sole boards? Are all ties and bracing still in place? And have any unauthorised modifications or alterations been made?
On housing scaffolds, the supervisor's not there every day to check the scaffolds, so it really is essential for the user of the scaffold to give it the once over. Check that the planks are in place, check that the handrails are in place, and if they're not, or if the access isn't provided, get in touch with the supervisor straight away so that appropriate repairs or alterations can be made.
If a new trade comes on site, he should do a visual inspection of the scaffold,